Hello and welcome to the shop. Today I've got a kind of a difficult project simply because of what it is. Unfortunately, it's an urn for an infant. The request is dark wood. I have this piece of walnut that I got from my friend Bart at Logs to Treasures. It does have a little bit of the sapwood, but is mostly heartwood, so we'll make it some lighter tones on the outer edges, but I think that should give it some character. I'm going to do something that I haven't done before, and that is using brass plumbing parts to create a screw top. I don't do thread chasing yet. I have not learned it. However, I feel for this project, rather than using a friction fit, which is what I've used for urns in the past, I feel that having a screw tight lid is more appropriate. So I will be mounting these fittings. This is a brass 1-inch nipple, and this is a brass 1-inch I don't know what you'd call this, flange or whatever. I'm going to be mounting them in the lathe, cutting them in half and kind of trimming down the sides of them a little bit using carbide tools. This I'm going to cut in half, and then the center here will be what goes into a piece of wood. I will be using two-part epoxy to epoxy each half, male and female, into the wood, and then we'll see how that progresses. I've never done this before. I have seen it done, but I've never seen a step-by-step process, so I'm going to film that for you as I work through how to make this function. Stick around. Okay, so this is not your usual. I've got brass fittings chucked up. This is a 1-inch pin jaw on my Novichok, and I've just got it pushed up against there and then open the threads. The inside of this is actually split in the middle, threads coming both directions, and I've got the nipple threaded in as far as I can get it to go. It doesn't want to go any further. That may change when I start trying to cut it, because I want to cut this in half. I certainly don't need this whole 2-inch long piece, 2.5-inch long piece. So I'm going to cut it first before I start looking at doing a little bit of shaping, reshaping here. I want to keep as much of the width of this as possible, but I want it to be perfectly round. It's not. So that I have a good surface to epoxy this into the neck of the urn. So first we're going to try to split this. Well, we're not going to try, we're going to split it. There is a center line here, so I'm just going to cut it on the center line, and then I'm going to smooth this out and cut it probably in half as well, so it'll be about a 1/2 inch deep, a little bit more than a 1/2 inch deep into the neck of the urn. I am wearing the face shield. Do not attempt this without face protection at the very least. You don't necessarily need a respirator with brass, but you do need to protect your eyes. See, that's not very, it's not really centered at all. It's going to be interesting. This is part of the challenge, is this doesn't really turn true, because it's not meant to be turned on a lathe. So, this is screwed in as far as I can get it. It is not cross-threaded. It's straight threaded, but it doesn't want to go in much further. So I'm going to start at a lower speed, at least until I get a groove here, so I can cut this in half. I'm going to go right at about 550 RPM. I'm using carbide. this isn't something I normally turn, so I'm not sure how this is going to react when it parts. It's going to catch. Get back about 650 here. Alright, I'm almost all the way through, and discretion is the better part of valor. See if I can break that off. And the answer is no. I'm going to have to continue trying to cut it. Alright, that wasn't terrible. So that came off. Now have two. So I could probably do this again. And I actually bought two of the brass part sets. So if I have a problem, I can do it again. So I'm going to clean this edge up first with the carbide, and then I'm going to sand it, and then I'm going to remove this. Alright, I'm going to give you guys a quick tip. I absolutely never, ever recommend wearing gloves when you are turning. If your glove gets caught on the lathe, it can actually wrap around and do horrible things to you. However, this is kicking little metal shards into the back of my hand where I'm holding my tool. I do have a solution that will protect your hand without endangering your fingers. This is silicone scar sheets. They're usually used for burn recovery and things like that. It's medical grade. You can get them at any drugstore, I would assume. You can get them on Amazon. They're not expensive. They are naturally adhesive. But the adhesive is gentle enough that it does not take your skin when you try to pull it off. So if this were to catch, it would just come right off without harming the skin. But what this does is gives me a protective layer here where those metal shards are going to hit without actually hurting. I can feel it impacting, but it's no longer sharp and cutting. And if it gets caught, it just comes right off. It won't actually harm me at all. Every time I see a wood turner wearing gloves, I want to get them a box of these. It really does make a difference, and it's far safer. Catching too much, so I'm just going to finish this cut with the Dremel. With the lathe not turning. I don't even know why I just did that. Okay, so that collar is now ready. This surface is perfectly round. So that's ready to be inset into my urn, and I can actually start turning wood now. So this end is fairly round, but it is not straight. This end is not round, but it's flatter. So I am getting an approximate center here, and I'm going to bring up the tailstock, see if we can get it to balance. Okay, so that side is heavy. A little bit closer. That's pretty close. That's pretty close. It's still off balance, but not near as bad. Get some pressure in there. All right, at this point, I've got to switch to my respirator because I am turning walnut. Alright, so at this point I need to make some decisions. Remembering again, this is going to have a brass insert that will provide me a threaded lid. So I need to think about the shape of the urn and the shape of the lid. One thing I think I have to avoid is I can't really get an undercut in here necessarily. Or I can get a bit of an undercut as long as I leave a level area for the lid to purchase. I also need to think about the shape a little bit. And although I kind of like this sort of a old-fashioned style shape, is to get the recess for the brass fitting. And my goal, I hope, is to get the brass fitting set in there and glued, but I have to hollow before I can do that. So I need to get this to a shape on the outside that I'm happy with before I begin to hollow it. So I'm going to play with this a little bit more, see what kind of a shape I can get out of it. And again, most of this is heartwood, but I do have some sapwood, about 1/3 to 2/3, and I like that. I think it gives a neat contrast. And so now I just have to play with this and make this shape match. It's spindle gouge with Mark Soleil's signature convex grind. Alright, so now we come to one of the most challenging parts of a turn like this, and that's hollowing. I'm going to be using a combination of tools. I'm going to be using my one-way termite with the small bit on it, and that's going to get most of my depth. And then as I get into the shape, I'm going to use this swan neck carbide tool so that I can get around the corner and get into the shape. But I think most of the work's going to be done by the tool. Okay, so I've got this hollow to depth. Again, this is narrower than I'm aiming for my neck here, for my insert. So I can creep up on that, and I also have, while I was hollowing, came up with some conclusions about my final shape. So this neck here, I'm going to do a little bit of shaping here real quick, and then we will get the neck inserted and epoxied, and I will stop there for now because that epoxy is going to take some time to set. So let me get my respirator on and we will continue. We're going to mix a little 2-part epoxy. I'm going to epoxy this in and call it a night. All right, the glue is set overnight, that 2-part epoxy, so I just want to clean these surfaces up and do some initial sanding. I'm not going to get too involved in that because my next step is inserting the threads into the lid, and then once I have the lid screwed on here, I can actually finish the shape of the lid and do the sanding and finishing all together, so I have essentially the same finish from top to bottom, especially since the lid comes from the same piece of wood. One thing I want to try to do is ensure that screwed tight, that band between the sapwood and the heartwood is consistent through the side of the urn. So when that lid is screwed tight, I want that band to be continuous from top to bottom. We'll see if we can make that happen. All right, so we've got our other chuck mounted up, and I'm going to go ahead and chuck this and take a measurement. Well, first I'm going to true that up. Then we'll take a measurement, cut our recess, and put the threaded insert in there. And again, this is just a 1-inch brass pipe nipple. It's nothing fancy. Somebody somewhere said woodworking is 90% problem solving, and that's what I'm doing. Is I don't know how to chase threads, and I don't have thread chasing tools. So I'm solving the problem by using something else to get threads into my lid in my urn. So it is what it is. It's working. So if it's going to work, it must not be a bad idea. So far, we have the body of the urn essentially finished. It needs sanding and actual finish added to it with the insert cemented in using 2-part epoxy. I've also got the lid with the insert cemented in with 2-part epoxy. I have checked the fit, and they fit, and that is very good. So at this point, my job is to turn the lid, make it match the urn. However, I need to take a brief pause and talk to you about safety. One of the things I never do is wear gloves while I'm turning. I spent 15 years in the United States Navy, almost half of that shipboard, and a ship is an industrial environment, and they spend a lot of time working on safety training with us. And one of the things that we learned that it was basically beat into our heads, for lack of a better term, is that rotating tools and gloves are a bad idea. However, yesterday I was working on my lawnmower, reseating the tire, and I had a little incident with a ratchet strap, and I cut my right hand. I have a very deep gash right here, right in the crease of my thumb, and no real way to protect it. You can't really get stitches there. So under a glove to protect it is a bandage, so that I can keep it clean, so that it can heal. I am perfectly aware of how dangerous it is to have a glove on my hand while I am turning. However, it's more dangerous to get an infection and lose my thumb or my whole hand or even my arm. So I am taking a calculated risk by wearing a glove. However, in normal circumstances, you will not see me wearing gloves. Now, I see a lot of wood turners wearing gloves because some woods or materials such as resin can be sharp and can hurt. And oak is a perfect example. Oak is brutal. Oak really tears you up. When I was turning the brass, you saw me use something, and I talked a little bit about it, but I want to show this again because it's a really effective way to protect your hand without endangering your hand. These are silicone scar care sheets, and it is literally a sheet of silicone with the natural adhesive that silicone is, and they stick to your skin, and they offer a padding or a protective layer that's thicker than your skin, and can take things like the sharp little shavings from oak or you know, a very hard wood that can be painful. Oak is not fun to turn sometimes, especially when it's really dry. This thumb isn't working really well. Or resin. Resin likes to shatter and chip, and those shatters and chips can really hurt. Did you see the way that just peeled right off of there? Okay, you stick it on the blade of your hand. The blade of your hand is what's usually getting hit, and that's what hurts with those shards as you're cutting, as you're holding your tool. The blade of your hand is what's taking the impact of the sharp shards of shavings, right? Well, this gives you a protective layer. You can still feel that things are impacting your hand, but it's no longer sharp and hurting. And if this gets caught somehow in the wood or in the lathe, it just comes right off. It's not tangled. It's not around your fingers. The reason a glove is so dangerous is if this glove gets caught, it's wrapped completely around my hand, and that can actually pull my hand around because it's not just going to pop off where this does. And that'll pull your hand around the piece, wrap it up, break bones. It's a bad deal. So again, and I don't gatekeep. If I see you wearing gloves, I'm not going to come into your comments and say, you should do that. You're an adult, and I expect that you are making informed decisions as to your own safety in your own shop. But I do have an alternative. I have an alternative for protecting the back of your hands when you are turning difficult materials that can be painful. In fact, I wore one earlier. I wore one because the brass shavings coming off of the insert were sharp. So I put one on, and that protected my hand without endangering my hand. So I'm very aware of the safety issue that I have a glove on. I am doing it to protect this injury. And I'm completely aware, and I will be taking extra precautions to protect myself just in case. So I'm about to take this lid off, put the body of the urn back on the lathe, screw the lid on, and then turn the lid to match the body of the urn. The problem is I do not want to create a situation where that gets so tight that I can't unscrew it. So what I'm going to do is take a little piece of cardboard and make a washer. I just take a chunk of cardboard box, an Amazon box, and I'm going to use an X-Acto knife here very carefully, and just make myself a little washer. Just to fit over that, to ensure that it doesn't get so tight that I cannot unscrew the lid once I'm finished turning and sanding. There we go. That should give me just enough buffer and enough ability to unseat the lid that it doesn't get trapped. Alright, we did a little touch up with some CA glue. There's some light cracks. I don't think they're necessarily going to be too bad, but I don't want to take any risks of this coming apart on me. Alright, if you work with walnut, you know that over a period of time, the lighter sapwood will darken to match the heartwood. And that's cool, and there's nothing wrong with that. However, one of the features of this little urn is this really nice delineating line that goes through the vessel and through the lid, and when I screw the lid on, matches up pretty closely. Not exact, but it matches up and it goes all the way through. And I like that feature. What I don't want is for the lighter sapwood, and definitely not this line, to darken. A trick I learned from the old timers at the Worldwide Woodturners Association is that lemon juice prevents the darkening. I will assume it's the citric acid in the lemon juice, but if you rub lemon juice on your walnut piece, it will prevent the walnut from darkening so that it's all the same dark color over time. And I think that's a really neat trick. So I'm just rubbing a lemon. I'm using the paper towel to keep the lemon pulp off of the wood. I just need the juice, and I'm just going to rub, squeeze a little, and rub that lemon juice It does get pulpy, which is why the paper towel helps. But I'll rub that lemon juice over the whole piece so that over time the lighter pulpwood, sapwood, pulpwood, the lighter sapwood does not darken. So just an old-timey trick. If you like to keep the light color of sapwood in a walnut piece, and that stripe, that little line delineating between the heartwood and the sapwood is just striking, and I think it really, really brings this piece together. So to preserve that, lemon juice. Rub it in, let it dry, keep sanding. That citric acid, I will assume, in the from the lemon will stop that chemical reaction. So just a little trick, Like I said, I learned that from some old timers, guys who've been doing this for a long time. All right, that has to dry, and then we will continue sanding. We're up to 180 grit and getting ready to start with 220. All right, it's time to finish this. I'm going to use a CA glue finish, Parfix 3408. It does not have fumes, and it has about a 90-second open time and produces a very nice finish. I'm going to apply it, wipe away the excess, and then let it dry. That will fill all the little pores in the wood, and then when I buff it, it will be absolutely glorious. The nice thing about it is because it has that open time, you can also apply it off the lathe. Wipe away the excess. Same here. And then I will let that set for about an hour or so and cure, and then I can work on the base and buff the finished product. All right, well, here it is, the final product, minus the laser signature in the base. I will get that done. But here's our little urn. Something to note, although this is round on the outer edge, and this is directly in the center, these threads are not centered necessarily. Something to do with the way they do the casting process, but this is not directly centered. The threads are not directly centered. So the result is that if I was to get this back on the lathe and spin it, the lid would wobble. It's not straight. But you and I can't see it unless you sit here with vernier calipers and measure everything out. We can't really tell with the naked eye. So if you are going to use the plumbing pieces as a brass insert to have threads, just be aware they're not quite true. They don't quite run true. So you might want to compensate for that in some way. One of my favorite features of this little piece is that stripe that delineates the sapwood from the heartwood. I think that's just incredibly striking. I really like that that's there, and I think that that's just adds to the appeal of this little urn. And it doesn't really even matter if when sight it lines up. I tried to get it to line up, but these threads are interesting, to say the least. They are not precise threads, not at all. And I guess for the function that they were designed for, they don't necessarily have to be precise. But when everything else I'm doing is as precise as I can make it, having threads that have a mind of their own is kind of interesting. So there you have it. A small urn, brass inserts. Let me know how you like this project, and remember, just one more pass means put the bowl gouge down.